shaking, everybody. Welcome to the Orange Bloods Recruiting Hour, a show that I don't even know has officially been named, but the first one we did got good page views and people seem to like it, so we're sticking with what we've created, even though we really haven't created anything other than to state the very basics. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Chad Hastings. You might have seen us on House Divided just a couple of hours ago, and if you did, you know I'm going to say like, subscribe, get notifications every single day until it clicks in and the entire world is subscribed and is getting notifications and you're liking every video. We'll jump right into it, although I will say Adam Gorney joins us from 20 minutes from Rivals.com. We'll talk rankings. We'll talk the Polynesian Bowl. We'll talk Ryan Williams. We'll get in a little bit of everything with Rivals' national recruiting guru. You can even yell at him about the Kelvin Banks thing if you want to, just for old time's sake. He's good. He'll be all right. We'll lead off with Jabbar Muhammad, the Washington cornerback, who is either on the 40 acres right now, Chad, or he's on his way. And this recruitment is really, over the last few days, it's been like the old shockwave at Six Flags. There's been some loop-de-loops in this one.
A shockwave reference. Come on now.
Where else are you going to get those other than right here on the Orange Bloods Recruiting Hours? So let me just roll this out to you. And then you tell me your very general thoughts. Like when I'm done, you just let me know what's in your head.
All right.
So when he goes into the portal, there's a real quick Texas might be the school to watch here. He's got three first cousins on the 40 acres right now. Two of them are football players. We know that Malik Muhammad is one of them. Billy Walton, also a first cousin. He's got a first cousin who's on the Texas women's basketball team. And forgive me, I'm forgetting her name, but she's one of the best players on the team. It'd be a chance to be closer to family. I heard from a guy connected to the Washington program who told me he spoke with somebody close to Jabbar Muhammad and was told that the thought was he wants to be closer to home. So as that's going on, Oregon comes in Saturday and they meet with him in person in DeSoto, in Dallas, the same way that Steve Sarkisian met with Isaiah Bond. Like, we want you. We're there at your doorstep as soon as possible. There were even some murmurs on Saturday night that maybe Oregon was the team to beat. Maybe he was going to commit to Oregon, which was all really weird because Terry Joseph was literally in his home on Saturday night. Sunday morning comes along. I'm minding my own business. I'm not messaging anybody. And I have a source who reaches out to me that says, I don't want to say any names, but his name rhymes with Jabbar Jahamid. And, just so you know, I'm not super optimistic about this. And everybody needs to know that it's not about NIL. Our coaches aren't lazy and we haven't done anything wrong. But sometimes I need to remind you, it can be tough for transcripts and academics and just getting all of this stuff processed. And there was some pessimism in the air. Then we get to Monday and he's doing interviews with our Alabama site and he's letting everybody know Oregon, Texas, Alabama, they're the top three. It feels like Oregon's number one. It feels like maybe Bama's number two. And if you'd read those comments and there wasn't a lot of praise heaped on the Longhorns, you might just from those quotes think, well, maybe Texas is third. On Tuesday, the DB coach at Oregon takes a job at Michigan State. They've now been hoodwinked in a way that Texas was kind of hoodwinked when Bo Davis took the LSU job. And suddenly Jamari Caldwell, the Houston defensive tackle, was saying, am I supposed to commit to a school that I don't even know who the defensive tackle coach is going to be? I really can't do that. I'm going to go to Oregon. Yesterday, we also find out he is going to take visits to all three. No doubt about it. Today, we learn he's on his way to Texas. Alabama tentatively has a visit set up after the Texas visit, but no Oregon visit has been set up. And so as we sit here today, all of a sudden it's starting to feel once again like, and I ask you this on House Divided, if you were going to pick any three schools, which position would you want to be in? It feels like Texas is in the right position to potentially get Jabbar Muhammad if Steve Sarkisian can do the Steve Sarkisian things. If he has as good a time as Silas Bolden had, Jabbar Muhammad will probably end up being a Longhorn.
I think, as you're talking through it, the old saying about familiarity breeds contempt. In this case, it's about familiarity being an advantage. And to me, it's all about which of these places, and there's really two to me now. It'd be Texas, Bama. Because like you said, the Oregon thing feels like it maybe have fallen off. And it would be wild if Caldwell ends up at Oregon because of what you said about that coach. Yes. And then Muhammad doesn't end up at Oregon for the exact same reason. That would be pretty wild. But it feels like a home discussion to me, Catch. Maybe it's capital H home versus little lowercase home. But clearly you laid out why home could be Texas. All that family stuff. But obviously home could also now be relocated to Tuscaloosa if he considers Kalen DeBoer's culture home. Like if that means something to him and Coach DeBoer matters to him. This is the guy, I'm going to give him enough credit to say, this is the guy Michael Penix went all the way across the country for with 3 busted legs. He had more ACL surgeries than he had legs. And he walked into DeBoer's office and said, I'm coming to hang with you. Just show me the film. He showed him Roma Dunze and those dudes, and he went, okay, that's it. So that's what, to me, it would boil down to. Who can make him feel the most comfortable? Who can make him feel like it's home? Because, Catch, as much as we want to make this about a business, these guys, it's a business, and they're just stars looking for the next level. Muhammad and those Washington guys just got the rug pulled out from under them. I mean, think about their world. Catch, they were in the title game. They played for the national championship.
9 days ago.
Yeah, they did not walk off that field thinking, who's in jeopardy? Our coach. Who's leaving? Our coach. They didn't think of it that way. But 2 days later, dominoes started to fall, and then they got crushed. So now it's about what picks him back up? The actual home of Texas, or the new home that they're trying to build in Tuscaloosa. To me, it feels like it's one of those.
It almost certainly has to be. Until we hear otherwise on Oregon that they're back in and they've got a visit set up and okay, but we know that I think Jabbar Muhammad is wanting to be a midterm guy. So Silas Bolden announced his decision yesterday. He's likely to be a summer guy. I think the anticipation is that Jabbar Muhammad would like to be on campus at the school he chooses soon, right? And Texas's classes just started yesterday. So there's a world where even if he waits until the weekend to make an announcement, they could probably have him set up so that next week he's in classes and probably okay. But this is something that has certainly some urgency to it. I don't think it's like Silas Bolden, where when we were talking to Bolden, because he doesn't have to make a decision until the summer. Originally, it was like, well, I may visit USC the last weekend of January, and then Arizona and Washington. And, there were schools that were out there. He is a California kid. He was mostly looking at Pac-12-ish, old Pac-12 schools, so the Washington, now a Big Ten school. And then there was Texas. I think he visits Texas, and they probably told him, look, we got a spot for you today. Can't tell you that we'll have a spot for you in January. And I think he comes out of the visit wanting to go to Texas, not taking any chances. Texas really sneakily, they've got 6 portal guys in this class all of a sudden. And Jabbar Muhammad could be 7. We know that, we know they want to take a couple of defensive tackles, at least one. So this thing is starting to add up in a way where in December I was being told, you know what? And I think Texas went out of their way to get this message out even around signing day. And you heard them talk a little bit about it leading into the bowl game. Hey, we're not really a portal team. We're going to always take more high school kids. And, but now You could get it would be real easy in my mind. I can close my eyes and see Texas sitting at 10 portal editions by the time we get to the summer. And I do think that's more than most people would have thought Texas would have taken. I just think that Steve Sarkisian is realizing I can make my team better right now. And I was thinking about this in between the breaks, Chad. I think Sarkisian thinks he can win a national championship in 2024. I think it's year one in the SEC, but Alabama's they're kind of gone for right now. And the way that we typically think of Alabama, they might make the playoff, but they're probably not going to be a top 4 team, right? If they get in, they're probably going to get in with a couple of losses, and we might have said that even before Nick Saban left. But now it definitely feels that way. It feels like Georgia's everybody's number one. But it feels like beyond that, there's no reason why Texas shouldn't think of themselves potentially as a team that can get a first-round bye, that can potentially play in a national championship game. I think Steve Sarkisian senses he's close. And I think he realizes that these portal guys get him closer. And they're at 6 now, but like I said, that number could reach double digits by the time the team reports in August. And at that point, we'll look at those 10 and we'll say, what would this football team look like without those 10? And I think we would go, holy crap, suddenly it's not the team that we've been talking about during the offseason. Where should they be ranked? I think, what was the point spreads that came out today? They were listed as a 1.5 point favorite on the road in Ann Arbor on some early college football lines.
Yep.
It's a lot of respect. And I think when we get to September and October, or really August is what I'm thinking, when we start seeing this team report, the totality of what they're doing in the portal is going to make or break this team, I think. And I think Sarkisian senses it.
Yeah, I would assume. I think Texas, and I'm just thinking through this list, Texas and Georgia, who you just mentioned, and Michigan, if they keep Harbaugh, I think would be in the position I'm about to talk about, where the portal, if you think about it, the portal is kind of like dating apps. You can use them for whatever you want. In, say, the Aggies case, it was just about you got to restock. You got to restock, and you got to do it immediately. I need somebody that can fog a window, preferably one in the backseat of my car. Okay, fair enough. But if you're in Texas, Georgia, and maybe Michigan's position, what you're looking for, Catch, is the ring. We can make the analogy both ways. You're looking for something serious. You think you've got what it takes to get to that finish line, and now you just need – it's like you feel like you've got the steak, and you just need everything around it to make that perfect meal. That's what they can use the portal for. So I completely agree with you, especially after what he just saw. Because deep down, he might have told both of us going into 2023, fellas, I'm not sure if we're all the way that good. I think we could be good. I think we're going to be maybe really good. We'll see about the rest of it. Now he just saw that. He just saw a trip to the playoff, plus everything around him. Hey, coach, the other 3 teams in the playoff with you, all are going to could all have different coaches. 2 of them do for sure. The champs might have a different coach when you go to play them. And then, of course, Georgia's Georgia. So it's a great position to be in. And it's just, it's going to create so much competition, so much energy around the roster. You just hope everybody understands what it is. And he's just got to be honest with them and talk about, hey, we're trying to get there. You may be one of those that helps us get there. Or deep down, if you realize that this is too much competition for you, guess what? Portal goes all different ways.
Well, and it's interesting. I was looking specifically with Jabbar Muhammad. By the way, congratulations to your Aggies. They took advantage of the Alabama situation themselves. Desmond Ricks is a really big pickup for the Aggies.
I hadn't heard. Who did they get?
Desmond Ricks, the corner from Alabama,
announced
for the Aggies earlier today.
Nice. I knew they were after a couple. I knew they were looking at a couple of those guys. That's good to hear.
He's essentially ranked kind of where Jabbar Muhammad is in the sense that Muhammad's a number 17 player in the Rivals rankings. Desmond Ricks was number 19. So, big one for the Aggies. The Longhorns have been cleaning up and boosting their team, but the Aggies, like today, got themselves one in Desmond Ricks. The thing about Jabbar Muhammad is, to me, he's very similar to what the Longhorns just did with Silas Bolden. If you take Jabbar Muhammad out of the equation, this is a team that you can pretty easily see, all right, well, Malik Muhammad and Terrence Brooks are your starters at corner. You've got Jade Barron coming in as your nickel, and your safety is going to be Derek Williams and Andrew Makuba. Like, that's the makings of a really good secondary. And yet they can bring in Jabbar Muhammad, and I think he then becomes the starter over Terrence Brooks. And just like at the wide receiver position, we're like, boy, they got a lot of good players. How do they get them all playing time? You'll do that a little bit in the secondary. There will be, how do you get, okay, Terrence Brooks was a starter, and now Jabbar Muhammad potentially takes his job. Well, you have to remind yourself, Texas rotates their DBs a lot. Last year, Malik Muhammad played a lot of snaps. Gavin Holmes played a lot of snaps. So now you're probably taking the combination of Malik Muhammad, Jabbar Muhammad, which, by the way, it would be really cool to have like Muhammad Island, where both of your corners are family members. And I haven't seen that before. That would be kind of fun. But now you're rotating in Terrence Brooks along with them. You're kind of thinking of him as a co-starter. And then either Gavin Holmes or somebody like Kobe Black is like your fourth corner. And just like at the wide receiver position, where suddenly you really feel like, you know what, the second string's pretty good. You can take the second string at the wide receiver position and make the claim that like that could play and be a starting unit at a lot of schools in the SEC. You can start to do that in the secondary, certainly at the cornerback position. But as good as Texas is right now, I would make the case Jabbar Muhammad, if he comes to Texas, is instantly their best defensive back. That he was the best DB on the field in the Sugar Bowl. He locked up Xavier Worthy. He locked up when asked Adonai Mitchell. Texas didn't have anybody like that in that game. And to be able to add him to what they have in the secondary just makes the, same thing I said about Silas Bolden and a couple of other guys that they've taken. They're a better team today by adding that guy to their roster. And Jabbar Muhammad arguably could be their most impact, maybe outside of Isaiah Bond. He might be the most impactful guy that they could have, because if I told you an all SEC level first team cornerback is in the equation, that's the kind of thing that takes a team from being very, very good to maybe something better than that. And in 2024, that might be the difference between the 7 seed and the 3 seed or something like that. You know what I mean? The difference between, hey, we're hosting our first game, but we're playing that first weekend, to, well, we might host every game that we have until the semis, right? Isn't that the way they're doing it? The first 2 rounds are home games, and then
just start
mixing. What's that?
Just one round. For 5 through 8, we'll have the home games, and then the quarterfinal round is bowl games.
Okay. Well, then you'd be like, well, the difference is all of our games are bowl games, as opposed to having to play that extra game. And it is one of the things that I don't think, oh, we've got Adam Gorney ready to go. Sorry, I didn't know.
No, I was gonna say, Catch, sounds like a great setup to a first question for Adam Gorney.
Well, then let's do it right now. Joining us right now, he's been on the show many times before. He's Adam Gorney of Rivals.com, national recruiting analyst. The guy that if you ever want to bitch about the Rivals rankings, he's the guy to go bitch to. Yeah. He's so used to being like the dummy that takes the baseball bats, like the piñata, that he's numb to it after all these years. Adam, how the hell are you?
Great. January used to be quiet and calm, and now it's not. So it's as I'm doing this, I'm typing out transfer portal stuff. So now I'll focus.
Are you enjoying? Like I got to be honest. It's been kind of the chaos for me has been fun. Like the idea that I woke up this morning and, hey, Caleb Downs is in the portal. And right when you think that might be enough, it's like, oh, now Caden Proctor's in the portal. And I feel bad for you because that just means, don't you have to constantly change the rankings?
Yeah. It actually is sort of fun. It's like, you get to know a recruiting class so well that by this time of the year, especially right before or right after that early signing period, you kind of get bored with it and want to move on. And now, you delete all, you stop following all of them on Twitter and you kind of move on with your life and they move on with their life. And in literally 3 months, they could be back in the portal and being recruited again. So for what we do for a living, it's actually a lot more interesting and a lot more fun. It's added an entirely new layer to recruiting. But it is busy. I will tell you that.
Well, Adam, you just led right into something I was thinking about when Ketch told me we were getting you on. It's exactly that. Not just for somebody who does what you do, but for these coaches, for the coaches at all these schools. The old days used to be about a class gets put together, these guys go in, and you, again, like you said, you transition your thoughts to the future, and maybe the kid ends up in the pros and you go, oh yeah, I remember covering him. But now do you, as you're watching this January play out, is it just an extra reminder of, oh my God, I can't get rid of anything because it all could get recycled? You said 3 months, but it could get recycled 2 years down the line, where a Jabbar Muhammad ends up in the portal again and everybody's going back to, wait, where's that kid from? And all that stuff.
Yeah, when I talked, I keep coming back to this conversation. I had a really interesting conversation with Kenny Dillingham, the Arizona State coach, on signing day. And he was basically like, it's nice to have me on, but signing day does not nearly mean what it used to mean. It means that I signed guys, 25 guys for the next few months, because now I not only have to recruit them to get them here, I have to recruit them to keep them here and make sure no one's recruiting my roster against me. So I can't treat them like crap. I can't, de-recruit them anymore. All of the things that all of the old time coaches used to love to do, that doesn't work anymore. So whether you like that or whether you think that's a bunch of BS or whatever, that's the reality now. There's a lot of guys where position coaches leave or head coaches leave. They used to be stuck, or they were stuck behind a quarterback and they couldn't get a shot. Now they have a shot. Now, what's happening now is that everyone's just kind of moving everywhere. And I think that like the idea was that people will get sick and tired of it. But what I've found from sitting on message boards all day and just doing it for a living is that people are actually more excited about it. Think about Texas fans talking about Isaiah Bond and Silas Bolden and Jabbar Muhammad. You're not talking about the guys that just played a game. You're talking about all these new guys coming in. So it's like there's now 2 ways to recruit guys. And you see it at Colorado, Arizona State, Louisville, Ole Miss. They are completely revitalizing their rosters in a snap. It's not taking 2 or 3 years anymore to do that. So it's making the game actually more exciting. I do fear that fans go, you know what, screw it. I don't even know who's on this team anymore. I'm going to just not watch it as much. But there's plenty, if it could work in one sport, it could work in college football, because that's where diehard fans live.
Yeah.
Adam, I'm curious. It's funny. They changed the part of the chaos that exists right now with what's happening at Alabama, Washington, Arizona, although not to the extent yet. Who knows? Maybe their roster will eventually get rated in the way that some of these other schools have been. They changed the rules so that the portal entry window closes. And then what we've learned really with Alabama is, holy crap, if you have a coaching job open up after the window closes, and most of the portal guys are now off the board because they're all midterm guys.
Yeah.
It's very problematic. When you look at what's happened at Alabama, and we've joked today because Dan Wetzel had a tweet out earlier where he was like 21 guys at Alabama are in the portal. And it was like, well, no, that number is now 31 because whatever it is now, like I've lost track. Is it 24?
24, I think was the last number I saw.
And oh, by the way, Caleb Downs is now the number 1 player in the portal period on the Rivals rankings, and Caden Proctor is number 4. How big of a dent has been made in Alabama from your perspective?
Huge. And in a way, Saban screwed him with his timing. Like his timing wasn't great, but really the portal really screwed them because these guys have a 30-day window and everyone's coming in for everybody. Do you think Georgia and Ohio State are not going to sit there and try to get everybody? Caden Proctor probably goes to Iowa, but a guy like Caleb Downs, you're talking about, 30, probably it ends up around 30, if not more players. Now, Jabbar could be going in there, and I'd be shocked if he was going in there and being like, look, I'm going to bring my own guys in. Everybody can kind of hit the road here. He did that with the coaching staff, though. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles this, because I wrote it this week. Like, Kalen DeBoer is a very smart guy and a very good coach. He's won over about 90% of all the games he's ever coached as a head coach, okay? But Nick Saban won 7 national championships, and that's the expectation now. So if he goes 10-2 next year, are people pissed off about that? If they lose in the SEC championship, is it Nick didn't do this, Nick didn't do that? So I think Alabama is a perfect situation of what can happen quickly, but on the other side, like that team could have won a national championship this year. They were good enough to do it. They were the 4th team, but they took Michigan to overtime, all those kinds of things. And now they're starting safety. There's their 5-star tackle, who God knows who else is going. They can all just leave, and so it's exciting if I'm sitting back here. But if I'm Kalen DeBoer in his offices right now, I'm talking to every father, uncle, business manager, NIL agent, friggin' whoever, to keep these guys in Tuscaloosa. But it might not even matter, like it might not. If I could go play for Ryan Day or Kirby Smart and be established and know that I'm getting a bigger NIL deal, it might just not matter to these guys.
I think one of the things, Adam, that Jason Sukumal and I argue about this all the time. He's convinced that the portal isn't really deep with talent, and that so many of these guys are just leftovers and guys that weren't succeeding. And so now they're in the portal, and how much quality can there really be if you're just getting leftovers that weren't cutting it at other teams? And what I've been trying to tell Jason is that is like what the portal started out being, but now it's turned into something else. And it's funny. I was just looking at the commitment rankings of a guy like Trey Moore, and I was like, okay, well, he's 59 in the Rivals rankings. And I was like, that's a little low for my taste. But then I started going and looking at the names directly above his. And I was like, well, God, there's Brock Vandergriff. And that guy was like a 5-star quarterback. And Tyler Van Dyke's at 54. And I literally saw him play at Miami and thought in September he might have been a dark horse Heisman candidate. The rankings are so much deeper in talent now that I started to get to the 100s and the 200s and the 300s. And I'm seeing guys that I think are absolutely going to help the schools that they go to now. In your estimation, the portal is how deep in terms of quality?
Yeah, I think when the portal started, the idea was that it's kind of the screw ups that can't make it work. Like, let's give them an opportunity to go somewhere else. They can get in, they could get out, they could have a new opportunity. But let's just go down the list very quickly, and I won't go too deep. But the number 1 player, Caleb Downs, maybe the best safety in the country. Walter Nolan had 2 great years at A&M. Evan Stewart, the leading receiver at A&M for 2 straight years. Caden Proctor started at tackle as a freshman. Cam Ward has thrown for over 14,000 yards. Dante Moore, a 5-star who got thrown to the Wolves and basically told Dan Lanning he doesn't want to start next year. So Dan Lanning goes out and gets Oklahoma's starting quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. Quinshon Judkins, one of the best running backs in the country. Lane Kiffin totally relied on him 2 years ago. Zalance Hurd, a 5-star. Malachi Nelson, a 5-star. Will Howard, a guy that kind of revolutionized Kansas State's offense. Caden Green, a shock that he transferred out of Oklahoma but is going to Missouri, a starter. Riley Leonard kind of revitalized Duke and got Mike Elko his job at Texas A&M. That's the top 12. But then you go down, like you said. Let's go to 80. Woody Marks, one of the top pass catchers and running backs in the SEC at Mississippi State. Fadil Diggs, big time guy at A&M. Justin Mayers from UTEP going to Colorado. Colorado has gotten 6 offensive linemen in the transfer portal alone. Caleb Elarms or Cal's leading tackler. Like, you could go on and on and on here. It's not just the screw ups anymore. It's like some of the best players in college football. And I think this speaks to I hate to use this word in college football because it doesn't exist, but loyalty. Like, the kids don't have loyalty to any program, whether it's Texas, whether it's Alabama, whether it's Toledo. There's no loyalty. It's about opportunity. Coaches will take a job the second they get a penny more, wherever it is. And now kids have that same opportunity and they're doing it. A lot of these kids, I will say, are probably making bad decisions. Like, leaving Alabama, where are you going up from there? You know, where are you going up? You know, that becomes an issue. But if you're going to Georgia, if you're going to Ohio State, you're probably equal. You know what I mean? So that's the issue that I think college football faces now. Anybody at the lower levels, if you're Toledo's running back, Penny Boone, or you're Toledo's quarterback, Daquan Finn, and you're good for 1 year, Toledo can't build if you're leaving. You know, like, there is none of that. But no one in college football, the power brokers, care about that. Nobody cares if Boise is good 1 year or if Liberty goes undefeated. You see what happens when Liberty plays in a bowl game against Oregon. No one cares about that stuff. All they care about now are these Big Four power conferences. So if the players are switching in and out of those, and then those four conferences can feed to get the good players from the lower levels, that's basically college football today.
So, Adam, as we look forward with the schedule we have now, let's talk about, you talk about a time period that used to feel a little bit dead, and now it's going crazy. April 15th to April 30th is going to be wild coming up. Once we get these 30-day windows that close up for the Bamas and Washingtons, as we get to that part, how important is that going to be for Bama, Washington, and maybe, whoa, there we go. The question just freaked him out to the point where he's, I'm out, I'm done. No, we got him back. We good? Maybe.
Yes.
Adam, you got me?
It's me from yesterday.
It's you, yeah. No, hang on. Let's see if we got it. Looks like his connection's getting a little weird. No, something.
Blake's taking him down until
something's kicking him out there. Okay. But I'm just kind of wondering about, you know, his thoughts on the ability of these teams to kind of rebound in April. You know, I think that was it. So, Adam, in terms of Bama, Washington, and maybe Michigan, let's say Harbaugh does head to the pros. What do you think are what are the opportunities going to be like for them in April to get that rebuild in time for, you know, summer workouts and the fall?
Yeah, and sorry about that internet disconnection there, but people have been talking about this, that the December window has been crazy, the January window has been crazy, but April is going to be worse. April is going to be even more volatile because now you have post-spring practice guys going, you know what? I'm not doing anything. I'm not seeing the field. They like this guy more than me. And, you know, that's one phone call to another school that says, you know what, we need a fifth defensive back. We need a third running back. We need this, we need that. And that's part of the thing too. And I've talked to some coaches about this. They've basically said, like, we don't even really do due diligence on these guys a lot of times. If it's a big name and he has good stats, we're bringing him in. We don't care. Like, if we have a roster spot, we're bringing him in. During recruiting, you can kind of take your time. You could know a whole lot about all these kids, but in transfer portal stuff, you don't get the same kind of vetting process. But yeah, like, Alabama unquestionably is going to have to go to the portal now to restock. I bet they're praying Jim Harbaugh takes an NFL job, because that's open season on that entire roster. You know, I bet they're praying someone gets fired or someone moves on to one of these open NFL jobs somewhere else, because that's open season. So, but it doesn't even matter about that now, because that April period will be just another one of these. Everyone's moving all around. The people who waited, if there's anybody left from this period, will be back at it, and you can go after people. What we're seeing now in the portal, and it's rare, but it is happening, guys are committing to a school out of the portal and then decommitting and going somewhere else. So this is absolutely recruiting 2.0 on steroids and it's wild.
One last thought on just the kind of nebulous idea of the portal. If we look at other sports, free agency in the NFL is when the league is at its most popular. I mean, boy, the content created and the discussion that it creates, and we know that the draft does that, and we know that the NBA is probably at its most popular the moment it strikes midnight and things are happening, and Woj is letting you know what happens. And we know, look, Adam and I, we do what we do because recruiting is so popular that it allowed he and I to have like careers out of it. This is like it on steroids, like you said, in that I think there's a hesitancy to say, I don't like this. I don't know who's on my team. And yet, I'm a Premier League soccer fan. When the transfer window opens up, summertime is as fun as the games itself. I have found and look, it's not all Texas related. It's not like, well, Texas has got 6 guys. It's, as a recruiting junkie, adding this to it is an incredibly big dopamine hit. And I have to believe that while there's a lot of clutching of pearls about this across the sport for a variety of reasons, I do feel like in 5 or 10 years, we're just all going to have finally swallowed the idea that, you know what? It's actually really good for the sport in a lot of really positive ways. Does it cripple a Toledo? Yes. But just the way we do with recruiting rankings, does it make it better at the top? Adam, I'm going to say yes, based on the fact that, like, I can't stop checking to see if there are new players in the portal, even though I don't have any connections to probably the schools they'll end up, attending.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point. NBA free agency is when maybe it's at its most popular. Hot stove baseball. I mean, everybody talks about free agency in baseball, all those kinds of things. And I think that's really at what you're getting to here. I mean, it becomes kind of its own world. Like the transfer portal becomes its own world. Is Arch going to leave? Is Arch going to stay? What are we? Let's find out today. What are we hearing today? Like, Quinn is coming back. What does that mean for Arch? So recruiting becomes fans, recruitniks, those kinds of people following it from a high school level. But then they get to know these kids on the teams they follow. And if they love college football, they follow all these teams and they know all about it. And then those kids are being recruited now. And so think about it like in college basketball, like if Christian Laettner went to go play for Kentucky instead of trying to beat Kentucky again. Think about if Bobby Hurley and Grant Hill, went somewhere else. Like those kinds of things would have made the sport far more interesting, but in a different way. So if you're a Texas fan, now you have Isaiah Bond, Alabama's top receiver, and Silas Bolden, a super electric guy coming in. That's not negative to Texas football fans. That's exciting for Texas football fans. So like you said, there is a lot of pearl clutching. Jed Fish preaches loyalty and team camaraderie and everything else. He has a 3-minute meeting with his players and then is on a private jet to Seattle before meeting with any of them. And he's at a new job. Gino Auriemma bitches and complains about developing people, and they're all in it for themselves and they're not in it for him anymore. Well, he's a multimillionaire many times over, and they have an 8 a.m. class. Well, now the roles have reversed a little bit. And so now the players get a little bit of a taste of it. So the sport is changing. Like, if you want to accept that, you accept it. If you don't want to accept it, you're going to be left behind. Like, my dad doesn't have an iPhone 15X and he's been left behind. Like, the world is moving on. And if you want to be a part of it, the transfer portal is going to be here to stay. Could they put some guardrails around it? Possibly. But I also don't think anyone at the NCAA is in the times of today. They don't really, grasp it to the level of the speed that it's going at. And I also don't think that they want to tell 18 and 19-year-old kids, no, they can't do something, because that is just terrible PR for them. So this is the situation we're in. Coaches can leave anytime, and they're applauded for moving up the corporate ladder. Players are making the same decisions now, and that's just the way it goes. It is very fun to watch. There are definitely some concerns about it, but it's certainly fun to watch. It's a lot of work to cover, but at the end, when we look at the rosters, when this all settles out, it's going to be super interesting to college football.
Adam, just one more from me, and it's about a timeline discussion. We were talking about this earlier. So obviously a guy like Saban, a coach is going to do something that works for his timeline, and it may not be perfect, like you said. But for the schools, do you think the lesson that might be learned out of all this is moving forward, if you've got a good roster, but you don't have a good football team, is the lesson going to be maybe do what A&M did, but do it quicker? Go like November 1st, and then that way you get as many versions of the portal as you can to recover from what you're about to do.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I would love to talk to coaches and have some time for them to be honest about roster management, because you almost like the NBA did this a few years ago and it seemed to work, and the NFL has done it too. It's either like you go completely terrible and build and bring everybody in at once. There was no middle ground in the NBA anymore. You didn't want to be in the wild card NFL game. That didn't do you much good. So you just like traded everybody away and then brought everybody in. Now look at what Colorado did. Colorado basically did that. They had a terrible roster. They were not competitive 2 years ago. And Dion came in for good or bad and was like, basically, get out. We don't want you here. Leave. And so he brought in, 60 people the first year. I think they're probably at another 25 this year. That's an entire roster rebuild in 2 years. Now, can you win football games in the same way that you could win in the NBA with 1 or 2 stars? Probably not. But it makes you far more competitive. It's at least a philosophy on how to do this. So you look at Louisville. Louisville went to the ACC championship this year. They went to the portal heavy. They went crazy in the portal. Ole Miss, one of the best years maybe in the program's history. They lost their starting running back, but they went heavy to the portal to get guys to make a run at the national championship next year. And if you look at that roster top to bottom, they might be number 1 in the country next year preseason. Now, they probably won't be put there because the people that vote for that are still sort of like, okay, if it's not Georgia, who could it possibly be? Like, who could play football? But I do think that becomes part of this. Like, there are already people on their staffs who literally just refresh the portal when, the NCAA thing every second to see who's in, to see if they could contact them, to see when they can get going on those guys. I do think that a lot of these schools, you're already starting to see it, bringing in like general managers, chiefs of staff, those kinds of things that will handle roster management and say, we need to get rid of these guys. We need to push them out. We'll have 18 scholarship guys. We'll have room for 26 portal guys. And that's the way we're going to go about doing it.
Adam, last question. It's a rankings question. I got to get nerdy for a second. Again, I look at the Rivals rankings and I find myself, I'll find something that I disagree with. But then I'll look at all of the guys around that guy that I think this guy should be rated higher. And then I start looking at the rankings and I mentally go, well, okay, I can kind of understand this because, for instance, quarterbacks are at the top, right? Because they're quarterbacks. But then there are guys that have multiple years of eligibility remaining. Caleb Downs is number 1 in America right now, but he also has multiple years left. So there's like an even extra layer of value that goes with Caleb Downs in theory, that he doesn't end up in the portal again. How do you guys, is it an evolving process? How are the rankings in the portal being comprised, given that it's like ranking apples and oranges and lemons all at the same time?
Yeah. And unlike some people in this industry, I'm not going to sit here and say we know it all and have it all figured out. Like, this is 1,000,000% a learning process and an evolving process. And let's get really nerdy about this. Like, yes, Caleb Downs is a phenomenal safety. He's number 1, but name the last safety that was taken number 1 in the NFL draft. It's not a position of high priority for NFL draft. Cam Ward has 1 year of eligibility left. He's a quarterback. He's number 5, but he threw for most of his yards at Incarnate Word and then at Washington State. And now he's going to a Miami offense that has very few playmakers. So how do we rank players? Like, how do we figure this out? And who should be higher? Who should be lower? How much does eligibility left matter to us? Basically, what we're trying to do is to say, this guy has been really great in college, or this guy's been okay in college, or this guy hasn't gotten his shot yet, because the other part of this catch is that we're factoring in like guys who we think are really phenomenal, but someone more phenomenal is ahead of them and older and hasn't gotten their shot yet. So you have to factor that into it as well. So a whole lot of, it's just, you put all of that sort of into the hopper, you think about it, you put a list together, you hope it's as right as could be.
Hey, real quick, Malachi Nelson, ranked number 9 in the Rivals rankings, 5-star quarterback just a year ago. How did he end up at Boise State? Did the game of musical chairs just fill up and he found himself out of big time opportunities?
Yeah. I think that was sort of the situation. The weird part with Malachi Nelson is that when the word was that he, right before, the summer before his senior year in Southern California, he took a weird visit to Texas A&M. And so the word started leaking out that it was right after USC announced that they were going to the Big Ten. He and his father were not crazy about playing in cold weather situations. They didn't want to, be traveling back and forth across the country, every week to play in freezing State College or in freezing Minnesota. Now you laugh, but people
because now he's in Boise.
I live in Southern California. The second it goes below 75, you start you just don't know what to do with yourself. So those were the factors. Okay. So he goes to USC. The expectation is he sits behind Caleb Williams for a year. And then Miller Moss has that great Holiday Bowl game. But still, everyone was sort of like, okay, maybe Miller Moss has a shot here now, but this will still probably be Malachi Nelson's team. It started leaking out that maybe Malachi Nelson was a hard third stringer there, wasn't really doing great. And so my suspicion, and I don't have this from anybody, but my suspicion was, let's find a place where they're going to throw the ball, where they're going to have talent, but that I don't have to face Michigan and Ohio State's defense every week. So I'll go up there, I'll post big numbers. Hey, if I need to go into the portal again, that's what I'll do. But let's get settled. Let's get a starting job. The cold weather stuff will be curious in Boise because that place gets ice cold. But that is my suspicion with that. Dante Moore basically told people close to him, I don't want to be a starter next year. I was not prepared. This was crazy how much I had to learn in Chip Kelly's offense. He got thrown to the Wolves. And that's why he and Dylan Gabriel both went to Oregon. I think Malachi Nelson's in a little bit of a same situation. He thinks he's as good as Caleb Williams. He finds out very quickly he's not. He finds out college football is far more complicated than he wanted to imagine it was. Let's go to a place that's a little safer, that I could really put up some nice numbers against Nevada, Fresno States, and Hawaii's of the world.
And probably be in the portal the year after he has the mega season.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then he's at Texas A&M or somebody like that. Or who knows, maybe he's even back at UCLA. Crazier things have happened in the portal. Yep. You never know. Adam Gorney, Rivals.com. Always appreciate the conversation, my man. Get back to work. You probably missed something in the last 10 minutes because you're talking to us. So
definitely. All right. See you guys.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Adam.
Chad, out of that conversation, there was a lot in that. I'm glad we had it. It wasn't player specific, but boy, I feel like I learned a lot in that. And just from a national perspective, how I'm glad I asked the question about Malachi Nelson, because you get the sense of just how complicated it is to, Dante Moore and Malachi Nelson, those two guys were 5-stars quarterbacks last year. And they've made moves and they're in different schools and they're looking for accomplish different things at those different schools. I love this. I wish the portal let us. I wish the portal was open and busy all the way to August.
Well, hey, one day it might be. I think those are two guys, just to finish up on those two. Those are two where I ask myself, why is that happening? Like, I'm good with the evolution of the portal from what we talked about earlier, that you're just trying to fill in a couple gaps, to what it kind of has become. But guys like Nelson and Moore, to me, were just obvious that they'd be back guys. Oh, yeah, it's their position. It's filling in. Junkins at Ole Miss is another one of those guys for me, where I go, wait a minute, why would he go anywhere? Now, look, he ends up at Ohio State, and maybe that ends up being a great idea for Quinshon Junkins. But it's those type of guys that are now the next wave, Catch, of this is a way for them to process their journey. And if part of their journey is either, I didn't think college football was going to be like this, or maybe I didn't think it, whatever it is, right? Whatever. If Malachi Nelson thought he was going to be the guy and he ends up third string, well, that's what it's for, right? That's what the portal discussion's all about. So we'll see, we'll see how it all shakes out. But yeah, it's just wild. Great conversation with Adam as always. And you can tell somebody that covers it as closely as he does, covers it, somebody that covers it like you do. I mean, everybody's just trying to figure it out, what does it mean for their own perspective on this thing. And obviously, if you're a Texas Longhorn fan right now, you're feeling pretty damn good about where you sit. Maybe one day, somewhere in the future, you're on a different side of this thing. But right now, Austin and Athens, two pretty good places to be when you're looking at the portal.
Well, and so Blake, all that stuff I gave you earlier, we'll save for tomorrow's show. Except, do we have that list of like the top 17 or 18 guys? I don't know how that's going to fit onto this. Okay. This will work well enough. So guys, don't worry about necessarily trying to read all of that. You're not going to be able to. But one of the reasons why I put it, I snapped this image, is it's a look of the top 17 portal guys in college football. You probably can't read it on your screen, but the bottom guy down there, the last guy on the list, is Jabbar Muhammad. Number 17 right there. But what's really interesting about this is that there is a sense, and this goes to the comment that, if I was talking to Sukamel, I would be like, this is really one of my biggest points of just how deep the portal is. Other than Oregon, if you look at this is the top 17. Oregon has 3 commits on this list. They got Evan Stewart, they got Dante Moore, and they got Dylan Gabriel. Kind of a tricky deal here. They got 2 quarterbacks. How often is that going to happen? Let's just say, as it relates to 2024, they got 2.5, right?
Right. And to be fair, and Gorney just told us why they got those 2 quarterbacks.
Exactly. Really unique situation.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It won't happen at most places.
Right.
All Dante Moore needed to say was, I want to play right now. And he's either not at Oregon or Oregon doesn't take Dylan Gabriel. Beyond that, Ohio State has 2. They picked up Will Howard to play quarterback after they lost their own starting quarterback. And they got Judkins, the Ole Miss running back.
Yep.
Beyond that, nobody else on this list yet has more than 1. It's not quite being dominated by Texas, Georgia, Ohio. You know what I mean? Like, there's this thought.
Right.
Texas is making out well with the portal. So is Oregon, so is Georgia, so is Ohio State. But it's not so one-sided. It's less one-sided than actual recruiting is, where we take a list of 5 stars, and it's like, well, Alabama got 7 of those, and Georgia got 6, and that's half the list.
Yeah.
It's not actually like that. If we look at the top 10 guys in the country right now, it's not including the guys that have just entered, what's crazy is like 3 of the top 9, 3 of the top 8 just entered the portal. Ole Miss, Oregon, Miami, Oregon, Ohio State, Boise, Ohio State, Missouri, Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, Georgia, A&M. It's like a hodgepodge. If I go beyond that, and I go to the next group in there. It's Ole Miss, A&M, Florida State, Alabama, Penn State, Florida, Louisville, Texas, Syracuse, OU, Duke, Ole Miss, Oregon, Baylor, Alabama, Purdue. Again, everybody's kind of getting some out of this. And if you're not, don't blame it on the big boys, because Purdue's got a guy who's in the top 33. Baylor's got number 31. Duke's got number 28 and Malik Murphy. Syracuse got Kyle McCord. There are actually lower level schools who are doing better in the portal from a recruiting standpoint and getting more high level players than ever in recruiting. If we were going to take the top 33 recruits in the country, you'd never see one at Purdue. You'd never see one at Baylor. You'd never see one at Duke. You'd never see one at Syracuse. You probably never see one Boise. So as much pearl clutching as there is, and as chaotic as it is, and as much as it probably does need to be tweaked, it's proving to be a fair system to everybody than really high school football recruiting is, where there's really like 10 schools that just get everybody.
It's an interesting point. I agree. It does feel like it's spreading out a little bit, and you're getting an opportunity to either the school or the player or both gets an opportunity to make a point that they weren't going to make in the old system. So, a cat from, and I saw the guy just on the list in that top 15, 16, the cat that was at Purdue, that had a pretty good year at Purdue and is going to go to A&M. Is that going to become a name everybody knows because he's trying to make a point and make a statement like, no, man, I was kind of lost at Purdue and now I want to go make a statement in the SEC. Does he get to make that statement or not? Does Judkins get to make an extra statement? Look, I know I was hanging in Lane Kiffin's offense, but I think I can be different on a different level, and I'm going to go make that point in Columbus. So there's a lot of different. And then what's the kid at Florida State? Coleman. He's my favorite example right now because that's a guy, Catch, you and I wouldn't even know his name if he'd stayed in East Lansing. There's no way I would know who he is today. I would have to learn his name between now and the draft. But because of the portal, I learned who he was. I saw his impact on a team, and I go, whoa, okay, there it is. It makes sense.
Well, and look, to that point, if I start at 25 and I look at, that's where Andrew Makuba is ranked in the Rivals rankings.
Right.
There's a player from Toledo ranked in the top 25 who's getting a chance.
Mm-hmm.
There's a player from Penn who's going to Florida.
Oh, wow.
He's an Ivy Leaguer.
Think about
He's in the top 25 of this list, and he has a chance to elevate and be something bigger and better. Purdue, Duke, Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard's going from Duke to Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's true.
And for all of the again, is it chaotic? Yes. Is there more good things going on, though, inside of this chaos? I think some people are just scared of change, right? It's as simple as that. But really, inside of this change are a lot of guys getting opportunities that they otherwise didn't have. They're getting platforms because we'll spend a lot of time talking about, and look, Adam did it. Adam said, look at the guys from Alabama. Those guys will transfer and what are they doing? Where could they possibly go that's better than Alabama? But that is such an elite level way of thinking about it. Because there's Alabama, there's Georgia, there's Texas, there's Ohio State. There are a couple of schools, but everybody else doesn't fit into that category. So,
right.
If you're Dante Moore and you go from UCLA to Oregon, that's just about him making his life better. I just have a hard time. I struggle to get upset and clutch my pearls because I see more good than bad. And if you make a bad decision, that's part of life too. If you enter the portal and you go from Texas to New Mexico State, that is like the world correcting itself. There are a lot of guys that are ending up at schools that are much lower than where they were previously. What does that tell us? It tells us they're probably not good enough, and they probably shouldn't have been at those schools. Nobody's ordained to have a 4-year career. That, there are a couple of guys on the Texas roster now that just don't play. And they just they're not going anywhere. It might be over their dead body before they leave. Okay. But I think it's a world that's more fair than unfair. And guys have every right to make bad decisions if they want to. And you know what? Some of these guys probably shouldn't be at the schools they're at. It turns out they're not that good. So they have to go down to a lower level classification. And that is life. That is, in every other realm of life, that's exactly how it works.
Yeah. Couple other things I want to hit you with before we get done real quick. Shout out to all of you on the Specs chat today. Great conversation on the recruiting show today. Also a reminder, if you're going through this cold weather right now, remember McCullough Heating and Air Conditioning can make sure your system's running right for this kind of stuff and for hot summers coming up. 518-0119 or coolmenow.com. They've been doing it since 1977. They've been making sure my systems have been running well for, good grief, it's 15, 20 years now, something like that with us. So 518-0119 or coolmenow.com. We hope everybody is warm and safe and sound. There's your QR code to scan for McCullough Heating and Air Conditioning. We're talking obviously a lot of portal today and craziness. Ketch, you were just talking about, I try to imagine these individual situations sometimes because we get lost in teams and the bigness of it. Can you imagine what it's going to be like to walk out in the swamp for that kid that was at Penn? Like just that part. Imagine every Ivy League crowd he's played in front of combined might not be the crowd he'll get in September, if it was his first game at Florida. That stuff is awesome to me. Another thought that rambled through my head as you were talking, if he had fully embraced it and had the opportunity, what could Bill Snyder have done with the portal?
It's a great question.
Let that cook in your brain for just a second, because that dude was the magician that could turn JUCO guys into stuff. And you'd go, wait, that linebacker's a JUCO guy? What if he could get that Toledo dude? What if
he'd be taking 25 a year?
Oh, dude, it would be. Kansas State's recruiting classes would go down to like 10.
Yeah.
And he would load up. And every year, the rest of the Big 12 would just be terrified as to what he had put together.
You just would have no idea from year to year what the hell Kansas State would be. But a guy like that would absolutely weaponize.
Yeah.
It's a more elevated, sure thing than what JUCO was back in the day. Right. And yeah, a guy like that. And honestly, this gives the Iowa States of the world, like if they can ever completely figure it out and get their NIL together, right? If they were ever to find a booster who was like, I'm going to donate $15 million a year to NIL, and let's just get with that what we can get.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, that's a pathway for a school who's an afterthought to not be an afterthought. And quite frankly, it's a sport that without this new avenue, the haves and the have-nots, because of the power conferences, were already, the little guys are kind of getting sucked out. If a little guy's ever going to hang in there and do something, this is probably the way it happens. But it will probably take a couple of years for some schools to figure out. And eventually we'll get some coaches where it's like, that guy knows how to. We did it with Chris Beard in college basketball.
Right.
It was like, oh, well, that guy in the portal is a magician.
Yeah.
Moving forward, hiring a guy who's a magician in the portal, probably just as important as hiring a head coach who's a magician on the recruiting trails.
Yeah, and for you and me and all those NFL fans out there, there will be elements that remind you of the NFL. Some of those might not be as good, but some of them will be good. And I think one of them is going to be this parody feel to it, where the old school version was, let's create scholarship limits so big time coaches at big time programs can't just have 120 guys and hide them on rosters. So that doesn't happen anymore. This, to me, Catch, is just the next evolution of that idea that you can't hide players. You can't hide some quarterback, right, at third string for 4 years. No. The quarterback can decide to go somewhere else, and then things will just evolve from there. So now it's just about who can deal with it and who's ready to deal with it. Nick Saban told us basically if he was still 55, he'd deal with it. But he don't want to deal with it at 72. It's too much to handle. So let's see how all these other guys handle it.
By the way, I'm kind of patting myself on the back. I called this years ago, like when it first happened, exactly what's happening now, other than this Alabama, Washington, Arizona thing. But like the way that this is turning into, I think, a real positive for the sport. Whether and people can say, no, it won't. Man, all I'll tell you is we should be doing portal videos on Orange Bloods Live every day because those videos get lots of attention.
Hey, what did we, why did we make up an intro called Recruiting Today? No. Did we make up an intro called What's Your Depth Chart? No. Blake, show them.
Fight! Get over here! Finish him!
I'm kind of okay with that being like the final thing in the show today, Chad.
Yeah, because it's fun. One other quick thing for you, Catch, to see if I can make you smile. If you take the last names of the receivers Texas just acquired, doesn't it sound like a name that Fletch would make up? Dr. Golden Bolden? Doesn't it sound like, hello, good afternoon, Dr. Golden Bolden. Doesn't it sound like that?
Very Chevy Chase, yes.
Yeah, very much so. Golden Bolden, kids. You're going to have to learn that. All right, thanks to everybody for jumping in today. It is the recruiting hour. We do it Mondays and Wednesdays at 4 o'clock. Coming up tonight in the 9 o'clock hour, it is another episode of The Outsiders with the Outsiders crew and maybe this guy right here talking about the latest.
I'll be there.
Crazy stories. 9:15, Jeff will jump in to talk to the guys about all the coaching and players and portal stuff that's going on right now in college football. They're massive Texas fans, those Outsiders, so they're going to want to know about what's going on with the Longhorns and all these acquisitions. That's tonight in the 9 o'clock hour. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and yes, getting those notifications for Orange Bloods Live so you don't miss a thing. Right now, you don't want to be missing anything. Thanks to Blake, the super producer, for all his great work. Everybody have a good rest of your Wednesday. Until next Monday at 4 o'clock for your next recruiting hour. He is Jeff Ketchum. I'm Chad Hastings, and this is Orange Bloods Live.